Men often like to think that they know the heart of God and how He goes about carrying out His will. But do we really know His heart? What happens when things don't go as planned, even when we feel like those plans are from God Himself? Are we still willing to be faithful in those hard trials when they come upon us? So often it's asked by unbelievers, especially, if there is a God, why do bad things happen to good people? We'll be discussing this and more today as we dive into the scriptures. Shalom. I'm Brother James Linse with SY7 Ministry, and my hope is that through this message, our faith and trust in Yah will be strengthened. And we really must understand that His ways are not like our ways. As Isaiah 55, 8-9 puts it, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says Yehovah. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." His ways and thoughts are so much higher than ours. Who are we to actually complain when bad things happen to us? When we complain or try to go against His will, what we're actually doing is not fully trusting in Him. So I want to look at an example, and this scripture here is essentially the key verse that brought me to doing this message. It's Matthew 16, verses 21-23, and this is an example from Peter when Peter was making this mistake. It says, starting in verse 21, Matthew 23, "From that time, Yeshua began to show to His disciples that He must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed and raised the third day." Then Peter took Him aside and began to rebuke Him, saying, "Far be it for you, Lord, this shall not happen to you." But He turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." How easy it is to make the same mistake that Peter did. Peter did not understand everything that Yeshua's death would bring. Peter could not see the bigger picture. Even though Peter had just confessed Yeshua was the Messiah, the Son of the living God, in verse 16. This is just a couple verses, just a few verses before. And yet, he was rebuking Yeshua to his face for saying he must go to Jerusalem to be killed. Peter thought this was an abomination. His thoughts were on the thoughts of men, right? Peter was mindful of the ways of men. And it sounds good on the surface to us. It's good on the surface to men. Why would he want Messiah to be killed? That sounds crazy. It sounds like foolishness. But Peter was probably thinking he could talk some sense into Yeshua. But he failed to realize God's thoughts are so much higher than man's thoughts. Peter failed to fully trust that Yah had it all taken care of, that Yah knew what He was doing. And he got a pretty harsh rebuke from Yeshua for it, right? He says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense," or as some other translations put it, hindrance or stumbling block to me. "You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." He called Peter Satan, the adversary, the arch enemy of good. Yeshua then goes on to say he's an offense to him. The Greek word here for offense is actually a scandalon. And I'll bring it up here. Scandalon. It comes from Strong's G2578. It's a trapstick, let's see, a snare, occasion to fall, a stumbling, offense, thing that offends, aka a stumbling block. This word that Peter was to Yeshua was a stumbling block. If we think about what Peter was actually doing here, he was trying to convince Yeshua not to die. He was tempting Yeshua to what sounds good in the flesh. But in actuality, it went against the will of God, the will of the Father, and would also in turn condemn us. There would be no salvation, for if Yeshua did not die on the cross for our sins, then we would not have the salvation that brings. So what Peter was doing was truly offensive, even though he actually did it with the best intentions, right? He's thinking he would save the Messiah's life. He was thinking there must be a way. It really comes down to being mindful of the things of Yah and fully trusting in Him. And many times throughout the Bible, we see examples of bad things happening to good people. Yet those who remain faithful are rewarded, always. It may not always be in this life, but they are rewarded for their faithfulness. The story of Joseph is a great example, right? He was wronged by his brothers and sold into slavery. While working as a servant, he was wronged by Potiphar's wife, who tried to lay with him. But because he was faithful to Yah, he did not fall to that sin, right? He ran away. However, for his faithfulness, she accused him of trying to lie with her. And Joseph was then put in prison. How easy it would have been to have a crisis of faith then, right? Stuck in prison for doing nothing wrong, for only doing good. Yet, he was not. He got favor from the prison guards. He was allowed to be a light in there. So Potiphar's wife, tried to lay with Joseph, and he was stuck in prison. How easy would it have been for him to have a crisis of faith, stuck in prison? And we know he was stuck in prison for at least 2 years, right? And some say it was like 10 years. That's a long time. 2 years is already a really long time for not doing anything wrong. Yet everything, his faithfulness, he stayed faithful through it all. And everything changed for him in basically a day, right? In an instant. When he went from being a prisoner to the second in command of Egypt, right? And basically everything was at his command because of Yah's blessing on Joseph. But not only blessing him for himself, right? He's also a blessing for his family as well. And Joseph realized it was all Yah's will and held nothing against his brothers in the end. It says in Genesis chapter 20, verses 19 and 21, it says, Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So in verse 20, you meant it for evil. When they sold Joseph into slavery, right? They meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about what they were experiencing in that day. That they had a place for their family in the nicest place in Egypt, in Goshen. So through this, we got to realize that Yah is in control. He knows what is best for us and those around us, not just us alone, right? Our situation may seem overwhelming at times, just like I'm sure it was overwhelming to Joseph when he was in prison for multiple years. But we need to fully trust that Yah is in control, even when it seems like the opposite is true. The story of Elijah is another example of this. Elijah is losing all hope. He even after he has what seems like a big victory against the prophets of Baal, right? He just has this big victory and kills like 450 of their prophets. But as we read in 1 Kings chapter 19, I'm going to start in verse 1. It says, And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life, and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die, and said, It is enough. Now, Yehovah, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Like I said earlier, Elijah had just killed these 450 prophets of Baal, yet he felt like he was alone. He felt he was the only believer in the land. And now that Queen Jezebel was out for his blood, Elijah was tired and weary, even though it seemed like he just had this great victory, right? Continuing in verse 5. Then he lay and slept under a broom tree. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of Yehovah came back the second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank. And he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. So here Elijah was traveling from, the northern part of Israel, all the way down to Saudi Arabia, all the way down to Mount Sinai, right? And he's doing this for 40 days. Clearly God was doing a miracle here, right? He's fasting for 40 days is one thing, but doing it while traveling, is a whole nother thing. Verse 9, and there he went into a cave and spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of Yehovah came to him. And he said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? So he said, I have been very zealous for Yehovah, God of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. So here again, we have this, how Elijah felt, right? That he was alone, he was the only one, and basically all of Israel had turned against Yah. Verse 11, Then he said, Go out and stand on the mountain before Yehovah. And behold, Yehovah passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before Yehovah. But Yehovah was not in the wind, and after the wind an earthquake, but Yehovah was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but Yehovah was not in the fire. And after the fire a still small voice. So it was, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very zealous for Jehovah Elohim of hosts, or the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. So again, it's interesting because Elijah gives the same response that he gave earlier, right? But this time, God shows him that he's in control of everything, right? He has that great wind, an earthquake, a fire, and then just that still small voice. So Yah is in control of everything. Verse 15. Then Jehovah said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, anoint Hazael as king over Syria. Also, you shall anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, as king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat, of Abel Meholah, you shall anoint as your prophet in your place. It shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill, and whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." So here we find out from God himself that Elijah had thought all hope was lost for Israel, and he was the only believer left. Yet Yah reveals to Elijah that he's still in control, and there's still 7,000 left in the land in Israel who have not bowed to Baal. Not only that, but after Elijah does what Yah asks of him, right, he actually rewards Elijah for his faithfulness and takes him up in a chariot of fire to be with him. So stay faithful, just like Elijah stayed faithful. I mean, he was weary, and he was tested. He went a long ways with very little food, but he still remained faithful, and Yah was quick to reward. Another big difference between man's wisdom and God's wisdom is God sees the whole picture, right? He is infinite, and we are finite. Even if we could gather all the written knowledge of man and make our decisions based on that, and having that kind of knowledge might seem actually godlike to us, right? If we could gather all the information we've ever had, that might seem godlike if we have access to that. And man is definitely trying to accomplish this with AI. This is one of the things that AI is doing. We're training the AI on all the knowledge that we basically have. We're essentially creating our own God. But even if we had that kind of knowledge, it would still only be a fraction of the knowledge that Yah has, right? We only see the physical world. Our knowledge is really only of the physical world, yet Yah sees everything. Yah knows everything. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." So, things might actually look bleak to us in the physical world as we see it. But there's a whole nother realm that's unseen to us, right? This unseen realm. I think 2 Kings chapter 6, 14 through 23 kind of shows us another example or picture of there is this other realm that's going on. And this verse here is when the king of Assyria was at war with Israel and became frustrated because Elisha kept telling people what the king of Syria was planning, like where he was going to be, who he was going to attack. And it was like there was a spy in the land, and so the king of Syria wanted to know how that was happening. So he wanted to capture Elisha. So he sent an army to capture the prophet, right? Verse 14. So 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 14 says, "Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, 'Alas, my master, what shall we do?' So he answered, 'Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are for them.' And Elisha prayed and said, 'Yehovah, I pray, open his eyes that he may see.' And Yehovah opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So when the Syrians came down to him, Elisha prayed to Yehovah and said, 'Strike this people, I pray, with blindness.' And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Now Elisha said to them, 'This is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek.' But he led them to Samaria. So it was, when they had come to Samaria, that Elisha said, 'Yehovah, open the eyes of these men, that they may see.' And Yehovah opened their eyes. And they saw, and there they were inside Samaria. Now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, 'My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?' But he answered, 'You shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink, and go to their master.' Then he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he sent them away, and they went to their master. So the bands of the Syrian raiders came no more into the land of Israel." We don't always see the spiritual battle that's taking place, and we rarely get to see, the spiritual armies that fight for us. Not because they're not there, but because we just don't have the eyes to see them. So don't lose hope when things are looking impossible. Don't be like Elisha's servant, right? That thought all hope was lost. I assure you, Yah is fully in control. Everything is happening for a reason, even if we do not understand why Yah is allowing it in our lifetime. We need to keep in mind there's this whole other realm Yah is also testing as well. All right, I want to read Job 38. Paul read Job 38 last week, but I want to read it again because this really just shows us, how God is just on another level. It says, "Then Yehovah answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, 'Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations on the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut the sea with doors? Or who shut in the sea with doors, when it burst forth and issued from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band, when I fixed my limit for it, and set bars and doors, when I said, this far you may come, but no further, or no farther, and here your proud waves must stop. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? It takes on form like clay under a seal, and stands out like a garment. From the wicked their light is withheld, and the upraised arm is broken. Have you entered the springs of the sea, or have you walked in search of the depths? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the doors of the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the breadth of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. I don't think Job knew any of that, right? Job did not do any of this. Neither do we. So, verse 19. Where is the way to the dwelling of light? And darkness, where is its place, that you may take it to its territory, that you may know the path to its home? Do you know it because you were born then, or because the number of your days is great? Have you entered the treasury of snow, or have you seen the treasury of hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? By what way is light diffused, or the east wind scattered over the earth? Who has divided a channel for the overflowing water, or a path for the thunderbolt, and cause it to rain on a land where there is no one, a wilderness in which there is no man, to satisfy the desolate waste, and cause to spring forth the growth of tender grass? Has the rain a father? Or who has begotten the drops of dew, from whose womb comes the ice, and the frost of heaven, who gives it birth? The waters harden like stone, and the surface of the deep is frozen. Can you bind the cluster of Pleiades, or loose the belt of Orion? Can you bring out Mazzaroth in its season? Or can you guide the great bear with its cubs? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you set their dominion over the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that an abundance of water may cover you? Can you send out lightnings, that they may go and say to you, here we are? Can you send out lightnings that may go and say to you, here we are? That's wow. Who has put wisdom in the mind, or who has given understanding to the heart? Who can number the clouds by wisdom, or who can pour out the bottles of heaven when the dust hardens in clumps and the clods cling together? Can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens, or lurk in their lairs to lie in wait? Who provides food for the raven when its young ones cry to God and wander about for lack of food? Just like Job could not understand the depths of God, God's knowledge, so he also could not understand why his trials fell upon him, right? But his faithfulness was rewarded. He remained faithful through all of this, through all the bad counsel, through everything that fell on him, through his sickness even, right? And his testimony has actually become an encouragement to many for thousands of years, right? This was the result of his faithfulness. I'm certain that if Job was given the chance to either go through what he did, or to get to live out a plain and peaceful life like he had before Satan had tested him, Job would actually choose the testing. He grew in his faith even more than he ever would have if he just had that peaceful life. His faith was actually mindful of the things of God rather than the things of man. And Job desired the will of God, right? Job's heart was for God through and through. And we see that through his confessions on what he did, like helping those in need, trying to make penance for his children, even though he didn't know if they'd done anything wrong, right? He was continually trying to help those in need. And if Job realized this was God's will to do this so that he could be an inspiration for generations, he would have chosen that. The question we all really should be asking ourselves right now is, what would I choose, right? Would we choose a peaceful life? Or are we willing to fully trust in Yah? Are we willing to step out for Yah and to be that light for Yah, to be tested for His glory, to be able to prove Satan wrong, and to be an inspiration for generations to come? This is so much we see inspiration for generations. These stories about the people who were truly tested and truly faithful. We always see these great stories and how Yah uses their life and their trials and their tribulation to affect generations to come. So are we willing to do that? Are we willing to step out? Or is our faith and trust in Yah even strong enough, though? This is another question we have to ask ourselves. Is our faith strong enough to be able to prove Satan wrong? And Satan's main argument, against Job or against God about Job was that he wouldn't love his life unto death. Like, we take away all of his health, we take away all of his blessings, he's not going to love God. He's going to turn his back. And Job got to prove Satan wrong, right? If our faith is not at that point, that we are sure that we have the trust in Yah to get us through those situations, that we can actually have the faith to prove Satan wrong. If our faith is not there, then we need to realize this and make sure we're working harder. That means, reading the Word more, praying more, fasting more, getting an intimate relationship with Yah even more, and remove the stumbling blocks, any kind of things that might be distracting us from taking our eyes off of Him, right? To cause us to think more like the ways of man than the ways of God. We need to make sure that our faith is strong, that our trust in Yah is strong. If we're where I think we are in the timeline of things to come, timeline of things talked about and prophesied in the Bible, and if Yah doesn't tarry, then the time is soon coming when I think we're going to have to choose. We're going to have to truly choose, but it won't be a choice between a simply peaceful life or great testing. It's going to come at the cost. That simple life or that peaceful life is going to come at the cost of our faith, right? And Matthew 10:32-33 says, "Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven." And great persecution we know great persecution is on the horizon for the believers. It was in the past. There was heavy persecution, especially right after Yeshua's death and resurrection. There was heavy persecution, not only by the Jews, but later by the Romans and lots of other people, right? Lots of believers gave their lives for their faith. They had the faith that was required of them. And this is going to be, yet again, what's going to happen. Revelation 20, verses 4-6 says, "And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Yeshua and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection. Over such, the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years." So there might be great persecution. It says here, those who beheaded for their witness of Yeshua and for the word of God. But there's great rewards as well, right? It says, of such a second death had no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. But we have to fully trust in Yah, right? This is so key, so key. Revelation 12:11 says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. So this is very similar, right? This is Satan's big accusation to God about his people, right? They won't love you unto their death. But there are believers, those who fully trust in Yah, are willing to do this, right? You know, in Revelation 12 here, it's talking about how Satan was cast out of heaven by believers who fully put their trust in Yah and do not love their lives unto death. Our rewards are not always in this life, but he is sure to reward in the resurrection. The disciples, they all had to make decisions to fully trust in Yah, and most of their lives were filled with great persecution and death, which actually brings me back to Yeshua's rebuke of Peter. So give me a sec here and drink some water. So going back to Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. Matthew 16:23 says, but he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. So why did Yeshua say, get behind me, Satan? You know, that's kind of a interesting way to put it. Why get behind me, Satan? So Origen of Alexandria, the ancient biblical scholar, suggests that Yeshua was telling Peter, your place is behind me, not in front of me. It is your place to follow me in the way I choose, not to try to lead me in the way you would like me to go. You know, Peter was in the wrong, and his place should have been behind Yeshua, to follow Yeshua, to follow in his footsteps, right? Like that's Yeshua's place. Or not Yeshua's. That was Peter's place. That's all of our place, right? We should be following in the footsteps of Yeshua, not leading, trying to lead and tell God what he should do. It says, and the following, with this idea that if this is how we are to interpret it, the following verses actually reinforce this interpretation. So actually, if we read verse 24, the next verse, I'm going to read 24 through 27. It says, then Yeshua said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and then he will reward each one according to his works. So he was really telling Peter, you know, you're in the wrong. You're telling me the wrong path. You need to get behind me. You need to get behind what I'm saying. You need to get behind the will of God, and you need to follow him. And what following him actually in this case really was being crucified, like laying down his life for others. That doesn't mean that, you know, every believer needs to be crucified or anything like that. That definitely is not what that means. But we need to be willing to step up and be willing to walk in faith, even if it means in death, even if it means going to that cross like Yeshua was, right? Peter actually took Yeshua's words to heart. You know, while it's not written in our Bibles exactly how Peter died. It's actually commonly taught. It's written. It's commonly taught that Peter died. He was crucified, right? And upside down is what what's said, and whether or not that's true or not, I'm not sure. It's supposedly that he was crucified upside down in Rome because he thought he was unworthy to be crucified in the same way as the Messiah. But we can't know for certain since it's actually not written in our Bibles, right? And the sources are from a later date. So we can't know for certain. We do, however, know that the crucifixion itself, or Peter's crucifixion, was alluded to in John 21:18 when Yeshua tells Peter what's going to happen to him, right? And so John 21:18 says, "Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish." Now, tradition states that Peter was held in the Mamertine Prison before his trial. It's also thought that Paul may have been held there as well at one point in time. And I actually had the opportunity to go and visit this prison last month. So I put together a short little video with some of the footage that I have, and I'm going to try to describe some things as it plays. Here we go. So here is the prison from the outside. As we take a look at it, it just says Prison of the Apostle Peter and Paul, Mamertine. So go about to the front door here. And when we go in, inside, they have this picture commemorating Paul and Peter, and we see them performing baptisms while in prison. It's thought that Peter performed baptisms in the spring from the bottomless, or not the bottom, from the spring from the pit in the bottom, and he would baptize some of the guards and some other people as well while he was in prison there. So if we continue on, we go down these steps here, which lead to kind of where the actual older prison was, and to our left, right over here, if we look to the left, we see where there's some pathways, and this is probably where the long-term prisoners were kept. Somewhere in these ruins here are there other prison cells, but this is not the main prison cell. This is not the big bad prison cell. This is more like the other one. Sorry. So this is looking back towards where we were just looking, and then we go through this room here, and this is right above where the main prison is, or the main confinement is, and we have a bust of Peter and Paul here, commemorating their time here, and then this would be basically the one access point that people had to get in and out of this cell, right? So this is a prison cell at the base of this prison. When he had one opening, you would lower the cell, or what would you call it? The prisoner. You lower the prisoner into this, and then pull him up later. But that would be the access point. So here's just another picture of the room. You can see the hole on the left there. And if we're looking around the room. Nowadays, there's a staircase that goes down to that prison cell on the left here, and we'll walk down this as well. I do want to say this prison was constructed in between 640 and 616 BC. So if Paul or Peter were here, they were actually here when this prison was actually like over 700 years old. So it's quite an old prison. So, all right, here we have what is the main prison cell. And can you just imagine what it would have been like to be in here? The only real light they would have had would have either been, via some kind of lamp or candle, but probably was just through this hole. See this hole right here in the ceiling? That's probably the only place they would have light from. And this sign here, it's obviously put up later, and it's just talking about the acts of Paul and Peter. And I'm not sure what these holes in the walls are for, but I just took some video of them, just looking at it. But with that, I just want us to think about what kind of faith they had, what kind of trust they had in Yah, to be okay with being put in a place like this. And even perhaps thriving, right? It says, the tradition says that Peter baptized people. And Paul possibly even wrote some letters here. It's great and heavy oppression. Yet through this heavy oppression or tribulation, their faith and trust in Yah was actually strengthened, I believe. But that can only happen if we fully trust in Yah, right? When we go through hard times, if we fully trust and lean on Him, He will continue to encourage us. The late David Wilkerson actually has a quote that says, "Faith is not to get you out of a hard place, but to change your heart in the hard place." So, with that, I want to read Philippians 4:6-7. Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Yeshua," or the Messiah Yeshua. He's working all things for good if you trust in Him, if you let Him do the work that He has for you, right? Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose." Those who are the called according to His purpose. So, while in prison, and I don't know if it was this prison or another prison, Paul actually wrote this in 2 Timothy 4:11-13. It says, "Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for ministry. And Tysius I have sent to Ephesus. Bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas when you come, and the books, especially the parchments." So, even in Paul's latter days, this was, towards the end of his life. If it was this prison, then, he probably was going to die shortly. But even in the latter days, Paul was still focused on spreading the truth of Messiah, right? And he was, regardless of the cost to his physical body, he wanted his cloak, some books, and this parchment. We don't know what the books exactly were, but he wanted parchments as well, probably for writing. So and actually, this is obviously not the first time Paul was in prison. The first time Paul was in prison in Rome, Paul had actually written Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. He wrote all those while he was in prison. Now, imagine if he had not been in prison, would we even have those letters or those books today? He was forced to write letters back then because he was in prison. But if he wasn't put through that trial or tribulation, we probably wouldn't have those books today. That word would have died with him. So just because it seems like calamity and oppression, by the ways of man, when they're upon us, doesn't mean that God is not working a great work through that trial. If anything, I'm hoping this message will encourage us to not be afraid of adversity. We should perhaps even welcome it if it means that Yah is going to do a great work through us. But we need to remember, right? We need to remember to be patient and wait on Yah as we fully trust in Him. This means not reacting to our flesh, right? And if there's many ways Paul could have reacted, and he could have probably reacted really poorly and got himself killed early on if he said the wrong things when he was in prison. Galatians 6:9 says, "And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith." In Proverbs 3:5-8 says, "Trust in Yehovah with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yehovah and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones." Jeremiah 29:11-14 says, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says Yehovah, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all of your heart. I will be found by you, says Yehovah, and I will bring you back from your captivity. I will gather you from the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says Yehovah, and I will bring you to the place from which I caused you to be carried away captive." Yah is in control. He has good thoughts of us, right? Thoughts of peace and not evil. But that doesn't mean we don't go through hard times to bring about the goodness, to bring about being able to be a light to the world for Him, right? Psalm 23 says, "Yehovah is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for His name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yehovah forever." Yehovah is with us if we trust and are faithful to Him. So we need to just continue to trust and believe. Isaiah 40, I'm about done here. I just have two more verses here that I want to read. Isaiah 40, 28-31 says, "Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, Yehovah, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might, He increases strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fail. But those who wait on Yehovah shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." And finally, I want to close with 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 18-31. It says, For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this age? Has not God made foolishness the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through wisdom did not know God, it pleased God through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For Jews request a sign, and Greeks seek after wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, to the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called, but God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty, and the base things of the world, and the things which are despised God has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence, but of him you are in Christ Yeshua, who became for us wisdom from God, and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, that as it is written, he who glories, let him glory in Yehovah. So, the cross, the cross seems like foolishness. The cross would have seemed like foolishness for Peter, right? That's why Peter rebuked Yeshua. But Peter wasn't thinking of the things of God. He didn't have a mind like God. He didn't see everything that God sees. So we just need to trust and understand that Yah is still in control. He's fully in control. He's always been in control, and he always will be in control. His ways are just so much higher than our ways. So don't actually, don't be afraid to pick up your cross and follow after him. Amen. Amen. Shabbat shalom, mishpacha. I hope you're all having a blessed and awesome Sabbath. Be blessed. Shalom.